The morning Garrett came to my door, he was holding a piece of paper in both hands, the way a man holds something he doesn't know what to do with anymore. He knocked twice. I already knew he was coming. I'd been up since 5, made a full pot of coffee, and read the same page of the same book 3 times without taking in a single word. When I heard his knock, I set the book down, spine up, on the armrest. I walked to the door. I opened it. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I want you to stay with me," because by the time I opened that door, I had been living in this guest house for 10 years. I built it myself, post by post, joist by joist. I poured the footing in the summer of 2014, the year after Linda died, because I needed something to do with my hands. I need you to understand what kind of man would come to that door thinking he could hand it back. Welcome to real-life verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. I am 68 years old. I ran heavy equipment for the county roads department for 41 years. Graders, loaders, backhoes, anything with hydraulics and a diesel engine. I know what breaks before it breaks. I know the sound a machine makes when something is wrong inside it that hasn't shown itself yet. 41 years, you learn to hear that. I retired 4 years ago with a pension that covers what I need. I drive a 1998 Dodge Ram 2500 diesel with 280,000 miles on it and a driver's side mirror held on with duct tape and a length of wire. The wire works fine. I check it every morning before I go anywhere. My wife Linda died of ovarian cancer in 2013. We had one son, Garrett. He was 30 at the time, already living 2 counties over, working in commercial real estate. I gave Linda the best 31 years I had in me, and after she was gone, I didn't know what to do with the main house. It was 3 bedrooms and a dining room built for conversations. I wasn't going to have any more. So in 2014 I broke ground on the guest house, 720 square feet. I built it to be permanent. In 2015, Garrett called me and told me he was getting married. The woman's name was Vanessa. I met her 3 times before the wedding. She wore a Pandora bracelet with 16 charms that clinked together when she moved her hands. She smiled a great deal. I noticed that her eyes moved around the room while she was smiling, as if she were taking inventory. 3 months before the wedding, I had my attorney draft the paperwork. I transferred the full property, the main house, the guest house, all 3.2 acres, to Garrett as a wedding gift. I paid off the mortgage first. He received it free and clear, $340,000 of land and structure, no debt, no encumbrance. There was one thing I kept for myself. My attorney, a woman named Margaret Pell, included a life estate clause in the deed. Clear language, recorded with the county. It granted me irrevocable occupancy rights to the guest house for the duration of my natural life. It was standard estate planning, protective, the kind of thing an attorney includes when a client is giving away the only home he has. Garrett thanked me for the property. He didn't ask about the full terms of the deed. For 9 years, things were functional. Garrett and Vanessa moved into the main house. They had 2 children. I saw the grandchildren regularly. I maintained my own space. I contributed to the trail maintenance program every 3rd Saturday. I kept to myself. I thought the arrangement was understood, even if it was never spoken. That was the first thing I was wrong about. It started small enough that I nearly talked myself out of it. April 2024. A Tuesday morning, Vanessa was in the kitchen of the main house when I came by to drop off a pair of work gloves Garrett had borrowed. She was having coffee and she mentioned, while looking out the window, that she wished they had more room for a home office. I said I could help convert part of the garage. She smiled and said that sounded nice. She never responded again. I filed that away, not as a warning, just as something I didn't have a complete picture of yet. June, at the youngest grandchild's birthday party. Vanessa was talking to a woman I didn't know near the back fence. I was 10 feet away, refilling a cup of lemonade. She said they were planning some renovations now that we have more flexibility. I looked at the main house, at the guest house. I didn't say anything. She didn't look at me while she said it. I didn't know what she meant by flexibility. I thought about it later that evening. I still wasn't sure. July. Garrett was in the driveway when I was backing out. He asked me in a voice that was trying to sound like it was just making conversation whether I'd ever thought about downsizing now that I was retired. I told him the guest house was already small. He said, "Sure, yeah," and looked at his phone and then put it face down on the hood of his car. That was the detail I couldn't set aside. He put the phone face down while I was still standing there. Not because he got a message, because he was done with the conversation. I had been talking, and he had decided he was finished. August. Living room of the main house. Vanessa asked me, directly and pleasantly, whether I was comfortable in the guest house, or if I ever thought about having my own space somewhere else. I told her I built the guest house to be my own space. She said, "Right, of course," and changed the subject to the school fundraiser her daughter was involved with. September. Driveway after Sunday dinner. Garrett mentioned that a new condo complex had opened near the senior center. He said it might be worth looking at. I said I wasn't interested. He said just something to think about. He went inside. I stood by my truck for a moment. I looked at the guest house. I looked at the main house. The lights were on in the living room, and I could see the television flickering through the curtains. I still didn't say anything. I had nothing to say yet, but I had a question I couldn't answer, and it was this. Why does a man keep mentioning to his father that there are other places to live unless he has a specific outcome in mind? I didn't sleep particularly well that September. October 14, 2024. A Sunday afternoon. Just past 2 o'clock. I was at my workbench when Garrett knocked on the door of a guest house and said he'd like me to come inside for a few minutes. His voice was flat, careful, the way a voice sounds when someone has rehearsed what they're about to say. I washed my hands. I walked across the yard to the main house. I sat down at the dining room table where I had eaten several hundred Sunday dinners. Vanessa was already seated. She had her hands folded on the table. Her bracelet clinked once as she settled. Then she was still. Garrett sat down across from me. He put a folded sheet of paper on the table and slid it toward me. Plain white paper. No letterhead. Just text printed from a home computer. I read it. It stated I had 60 days to vacate the guest house. Garrett said, "You've had a good run here, Dad. Time to find your own place. I want you to understand something about me. I did not raise my voice. I did not put the paper down. I did not tell him what I knew, or what I suspected, or what I had spent 41 years learning about structures that look sound but aren't. A machine that's failing tells you what it's doing, if you know how to listen." I had been listening for months. I was not surprised. I folded the paper. I stood up. I walked back to the guest house. Vanessa said as I was pushing back my chair, "It's not personal, Howard. It's just what's best for our family right now." I closed the door of the guest house behind me. I sat in my chair for a while. I looked at the workbench, at the tools on their hooks, each one in its place. I had one thing left to check. Dennis Kowalski has been my friend for 19 years. He drives a 1987 Ford F-150 he rebuilt himself. Where his radio used to be, he's taped a laminated photo of his grandkids to the dashboard. That's the kind of man Dennis is. I called him that evening, not to tell him what had happened. Not exactly. Just to hear a voice I trusted. He asked me how I was doing, and I told him there had been some movement on the property situation. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't say it was probably a misunderstanding, or that families work things out. He said, "I'll bring the trailer by Thursday. We'll get you moved in a day." He meant it as help. He was ready to move his afternoon, his truck, his trailer, his back, for a friend who might need it. No hesitation. No conditions. No conditions. No conditions whether it was inconvenient. I told him I'd let him know. He said the trailer was available whenever I needed it. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. The difference between a man who offers you what you might not need and a man who hands you a piece of paper telling you to leave. I didn't say anything about it then. I'm saying it now. I want you to stay with me here, because this is the part where I need to be careful about how I tell it. I have spent 41 years looking at a piece of equipment and knowing what it can do and what it can't. When you run a grader for that long, you develop a habit of not assuming. You check the hydraulics. You read the service log. You don't trust that something is working just because nobody's told you it isn't. When Garrett handed me that letter, I did not assume I knew my own legal position. I knew what I had set up in 2015. I knew what Margaret Pell had put in that deed, but I also knew I hadn't looked at the document in 9 years. And a man who acts on memory when he should be acting on paper is a man who makes the same kind of mistake Garrett made. There was something he hadn't accounted for. I believed that. But I needed to confirm it. 11 days after I walked out of that dining room, I had not said a word to Garrett or Vanessa. I had gone about my routine. Third Saturday, I drove out to the trail maintenance site and checked the hydraulics on the brush cutter and sharpened 2 blades and updated the maintenance log. I came home. I made dinner. I read. I slept. From the main house, through the kitchen window, I could see the lights on. I assumed they believed I was deciding where to go. They were not wrong that I was deciding something. The first week I went through my own files. I found the closing documents from 2015. I found what I was looking for, and I read it twice, and I folded it back into the envelope. On the 11th day, I drove to Margaret Pell's office. Margaret Pell has been an attorney for 37 years. She keeps hard candies in a cut crystal dish on her desk that nobody ever takes. She wears her reading glasses on a beaded chain and lifts them to her face the way someone lifts a tool when they're ready to use it. I sat down across from her desk and told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said nothing for a moment. Then she pulled her glasses up, opened her computer, and pulled the county recorder's database. She found the deed. She read the relevant section. She looked up at me over her glasses. "You don't need to move, Howard. You never did." The life estate clause was exactly where she had put it in 2015. Clear language. Irrevocable occupancy rights for the duration of my natural life. Filed with the county. A matter of public record for 9 years. Garrett had consulted an attorney about removing a family member from a guest house. His attorney had given him general eviction guidance. He had not pulled the deed. Garrett had not mentioned the life estate clause because Garrett did not know the life estate clause existed. Neither man had read the document. Garrett had handed me a letter on plain paper telling me to vacate a home I had an irrevocable legal right to occupy for the rest of my life. He had done it without reading the deed to property he was given as a gift. He had taken his wife's ambition as fact and his attorney's general advice as law, and he had never once looked at the actual document. I had built this house with my hands. I had paid off the mortgage on the main house before I transferred it. I had given my son $340,000 of free and clear land, and asked nothing back except the right to stay in the 720 square feet I had built for myself. And I had been careful enough, in 2015, to make sure that right was permanent. Margaret drafted 2 documents. The first was a formal notice of life estate rights addressed to Garrett and his attorney. The second was a document stating that any attempt to interfere with my occupancy of the guest house would constitute unlawful eviction and result in immediate legal action. She had them couriered to Garrett's attorney on October 24. She asked me, before I left her office, whether I was sure about how I wanted to proceed. I thought about the dining room table, the folded paper, the phone placed face down on the hood of a car, the word flexibility. I told her I was sure. I was up before 5 on October 25th, made coffee, sat with it. The guest house was quiet in the way it is, quiet before the light changes. That particular stillness you only get in a structure you've lived in long enough to know its sounds. I read the same page of the same book 3 times. Then I heard footsteps on the path from the main house. I set the book down spine up on the armrest. I walked to the door. Garrett was standing on the step holding a copy of Margaret's notice in both hands. His face had the color of someone who has understood something they cannot undo. He asked if we could talk. I stepped outside. I did not invite him in. He asked if this was really necessary. He asked if we could work something out. I reached back inside to the entry table. I had printed a copy of the original recorded deed the night before. The life estate clause was highlighted in yellow. I had used a full stroke, clean edge to clean edge. The way you mark something you want someone to see. I held it out to him. He took it. I said, "You've had a good run here, Garrett. I'm staying." He looked at the highlighted text. I counted, without meaning to. 10 seconds. His mouth opened, closed. He looked at the main house. He turned and walked back down the path. He did not look back. Vanessa did not come to the door. I went inside. I closed the door. Not hard, just closed it. The way you close a door when you live somewhere, and you're done with the cold for the morning. I poured the rest of the coffee into a clean cup. Outside the kitchen window, the light was coming up over the tree line the way it does in late October in this part of the country. Thin and pale, the kind of light that doesn't warm anything yet but shows you what's there. I had built this house in the summer after Linda died because I needed something to do with my hands. I had put every post in plumb and every joist level, and I had done it the way I did everything for 41 years, which is to say I had checked my work, and I had not assumed. That October morning the guest house still stood. It always had.